Hello and welcome back to Librarian of the Rings. Have you ever wondered how far a league is, or any other of those archaic units of measurement used in Lord of the Rings? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. Welcome back, my name is Ben, I'm the librarian, and today we are going to be talking all about the archaic units of measurement. This can be a sticking point for a lot of fans because they don't understand the distances. It'll be confusing when you hear characters like Gandalf say something like 45 leagues because you don't have any idea what that means. It's just not a unit that we use anywhere in the world today. Whether you use the imperial system or the metric system, you're still kind of just lost there, even though it is an imperial unit measurement. 4 different units of measurement that we're not really used to today, and those are the league, the furlong, the fathom, and the ell. And the league is used more than any other, so we're going to go ahead and tackle that first. And first off, I want to say, of course, I have a book recommendation for you today. This here is the Atlas of Middle-earth. It's by Karen Wynne Fonstad, and it's really useful in that it has a lot of maps and things in it, but it also explains what I'm going to explain to you today, because it was something that Karen had to understand in order to be able to make the maps as accurate as they possibly could be. And they couldn't be completely accurate because Tolkien wasn't always completely accurate. So that's a book that you can go ahead and check out for a little bit more on this distance thing. So with a league is used probably more than any other unit of measurement. Now, some of these references to leagues may be referring to organizational structures, like a league of people together, a league of elves and men, that kind of thing. But many of them are referencing distance. It's fairly simple, actually, to understand leagues. You just have to know that a league in Tolkien's terms is 3 miles. You triple it, that's about how many miles it is. So for those using the imperial system, that makes it a little bit easier. For those using the metric system, we're going to go with about 5 kilometers for that reference. Now we know this because it's found in Unfinished Tales, and 3 is kind of the generally recognized term for a league, although it has ranged pretty widely depending on where you're at historically and regionally. So with that in mind, we are much better equipped to understand what a league is. From there, let's move to the next largest unit of measurement, which is the furlong. Furlong is used about a dozen times in the Lord of the Rings. In this case, it always refers to distance. And a furlong is basically used when something's not sufficient distance to use a league or a mile, but it's still fairly far. And so a furlong is about 220 yards, or the equivalent of about 200 meters. The next unit of measurement that we need to talk about is the fathom. And fathom is almost always used for vertical distance. And fathom is really a nautical term. It's used by sailors. So it's interesting that it gets used in Lord of the Rings, which, while there are many references to the ocean and the sea longing, there really isn't a lot of watercraft type things going on in the Lord of the Rings. So fathom is referenced 10 times, and a fathom is fairly easy to understand. A fathom is going to be 2 yards or 6 feet, close to the equivalent of 2 meters. The distance of the cliff that Frodo and Sam are on, and how long the rope is for them to be able to get down. So again, remember, this is always in vertical feet. And to understand what a fathom is brings us to the last of the archaic kind of distance terms, and that is an ell. An ell is only referenced 1 time in the Lord of the Rings, and it's specifically in relationship to Sam's rope that he gets from the elves of Lothlorien. And so he is talking with Frodo about the distance of this cliff and the rope that they're going to use. Frodo is estimating the distance of the cliff at 18 fathoms, and Sam estimates the length of the rope to be about the same length, but he measures it in ells. He says 30 ells. So ells is a really confusing term, and when you get into it, it's kind of difficult to figure out what it is because there was kind of a wide range of it. But because we have this direct correlation here that Sam is making of about 30 ells to 18 fathoms, we can kind of figure out that a fathom, being about 6 feet, makes an ell just about 45 inches, or around 1.5 yards. So what does this all do for us, kind of understanding it? Well, it just helps us to have a better view of the distances and lengths and measurements that are in the Lord of the Rings, which can be really helpful. I know this might have been confusing for you, and that's okay. It's not a big deal if you don't understand all of it all of the time. Remember, even Peter Jackson seems to have a big difficulty with distances in the Lord of the Rings, and I guarantee he had a bigger math budget than you do. But just understanding kind of the general nature of it can be really helpful. So let's just go through some examples so that we can tie this down a little bit more to what is happening in the Lord of the Rings. So we have a measurement of the Shire in the introduction, and that measurement is from the north to the south, basically, and that is about 50 leagues. Well, 50 leagues, of course, we're going to multiply that by 3, 150 miles. Now, 150 miles is going to be the equivalent of about 241 kilometers for those using the metric system. So that helps us to just kind of grasp what the size of the Shire is. When they're traveling across the Shire, what kind of distances are they doing? Another Shire-related thing is it says that no men besides the Bree folk had settled within 100 leagues of the Shire. Well, that's pretty easy. 100 leagues, 300 miles. So when you think about that, there are no men besides these people in Bree for 300 miles around the Shire. And when you're talking about foot and horse traffic, 300 miles, it's a considerable distance, so it's no wonder that hobbits don't really see men that often. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the distances in The Lord of the Rings, you don't need to be able to tie them down to exact numbers because they're almost all estimates being done by the characters there. For example, Aragorn makes this estimate when Frodo's asking him about how cold it is and why it's not warmer when they've come south. He's explaining that they've only come about 60 leagues south of where they were in the Shire. And 60 leagues, of course, is the equivalent of about 180 miles. So it doesn't make that much difference in terms of the climate because they just haven't come that far. But remember, this is just Aragorn making an estimate. It's just a guess, basically, on his part. Now, it's probably educated. He is a ranger. He's done a lot of traveling, but it's still like he's not going to know exactly where they are in relation to the southern part of the Shire. So just keep in mind, most of these are estimates. You get Gandalf, you get Gimli, you get Legolas. They all are making estimates, and they use leagues as kind of a form for that estimate. One of the interesting ones is we don't get a lot of insight into Gollum's mind all the time, but we do have this one reference to where he is actually estimating distance. He estimates that there are 30 leagues from the Morannon down to the crossroads. And he has a specific time period in which he wants to be able to travel those 30 leagues. Well, 30 leagues is 90 miles. So that really helps to put it in perspective how fast Gollum is trying to accomplish this. He wants to be able to do it in 4 marches. And so he wants to, in 4 traveling periods, be able to travel 90 miles. Kind of tells you how much he's trying to push the hobbits through a very harsh environment in order to get them moving along. So it's interesting that even Gollum is using the same units of measurement. Now for fathoms, there are a couple of places that are useful to kind of think about this. There is the Stairfall, which is as they're coming up to Moria, it's where the falls should be coming down, but the river's dried up. That's supposed to be about 5 fathoms, or if we double that, that's going to be 10 yards, closest around 9 meters. And so that's about how far that waterfall should be coming down at that point. Another one is from the base of the White Tower in Minas Tirith to the tip of it is 50 fathoms. That's going to be 100 yards or about 91 meters. So that just tells you really how tall that tower is. Now remember, in terms of construction, we're talking about kind of a hand tool society, although the Numenorians were very advanced. Still, building a tower that is 100 yards or 300 feet tall, that's pretty big. It's pretty massive structure when you're thinking about it. Then you figure that it's up on top of this entire kind of mountain that the city's built on, and it's really high and impressive. Now furlongs doesn't get used a lot, but it is interesting to note that it does get used again in this Moria setting when we're talking about the lake that's been made and has dried up that waterfall. Well, then we measure furlongs, 2 or 3 across the widest point of the lake. Now 2 or 3 furlongs, that's some pretty big wiggle room here when we're talking about the distance of a lake, because if a furlong is going to be about 220 yards, we're talking about a distance of about 400 to 600 yards here. 200 yards of wiggle room on how wide that lake might be, which is fairly significant. If you think about a lake and you think about 2 extra football fields onto the width of that, for those working in the metric system, that's going to be about 365 to about 548 meters across there. Let's talk about the rope again. Now the rope, remember, was going to be about 30 ells or 18 fathoms. So when we figure that out, it comes out to be about 112 feet, which is the equivalent of about 30 meters. So when you think about carrying 112 feet of rope around, that really puts into perspective just how light and small this rope would actually have to be. So when it's described that way, you kind of understand, oh yeah, it really compacts down, because Sam is carrying 112 feet around of it in the bottom of his backpack, and he forgets about it. Now, I don't know if you've spent a lot of time carrying rope around, but rope can be quite heavy, particularly really strong rope. So to just forget about 112 feet of it is really a testament to just the elves' craftsmanship and their ability to make something very light, but also very strong. Okay, I hope this video has really helped you to better conceive of the distances and the measurements in The Lord of the Rings. I know that sometimes Tolkien's language can be a little bit archaic, and it can present a little bit of a challenge to new readers coming into it. So I want to make this video and just clarify kind of those distances for you. And now I'd like to hear from you. Do you have any other knowledge of distances in The Lord of the Rings, and how they're being portrayed or the kind of conversions that we should be doing in order to understand them, because I don't think any of this is an exact science. So I look forward to hearing from you in the comments, and until next time, farewell wherever you fare. May your ears receive you at your journey's end.